Welcome to the Luxury Equestrian Network spring event. I'm so glad you guys are here. See a lot of familiar faces and some new ones, so I just wanted to briefly introduce myself and give you a little bit of background on the network, what we're doing here. So my name is Lindsey Hunter. I'm an equestrian interior designer. And having such a specialized niche, as you can imagine, networking can be challenging. And so I would go to networking events, and I was having a hard time finding other equestrian professionals, builders, architects. And so as I started finding these people on my own, I decided that we all needed a space to come together and form a community and build relationships and work together and grow our businesses and support each other, which I think not only helps us and our businesses, but it greatly benefits the clients as well when we can come together as a team and work in a collaborative way and communicate well. And so with the help of American Stalls, who has been my sponsor since the very beginning, I've been able to put on events like this and invite builders, architects, realtors, product manufacturers, landscape architects, and form this community. So before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors today. We have American Stalls, and we're lucky to have CEO Yash Balasaria with us today, and then Weissmann Architecture. So thank you guys so much for sponsoring this event.
Thank you.
So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and today we're going to talk about building synergy and working together in a collaborative environment. So, like I said, we have Yash Balasaria from American Stalls, which is a premier stall manufacturing company out of Virginia. We have Weissmann, architect, amazing architect. He also has a stunning book today, so please make sure that you meet him at the signing table after the event. After the panel. We have Grand Prix show jumper Lane Clarke, and equestrian realtor Lindsey Vorwith from Maine Real Estate. She's an amateur jumper, and for those of you who are not equestrians, that I did not just insult her, I promise you. Wouldn't do that to my friend, especially on her birthday.
Oh.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we gotta sing her happy.
No. Maybe later.
That will make her comfortable.
All right, so I'd like to talk about building equestrian facilities, working together as a team. And I was thinking, Wade, if it's okay, can we put you on the chopping block first?
Sure.
All right. So building equestrian facilities, we have a bigger team, I feel like, than a normal project. You and I work on a lot of residential where we have kind of the traditional team of the builder, architect, designer, working with a family, homeowners, maybe we have one or two decision makers. But when we get into equestrian properties, I feel like the team is a lot bigger, and we might have a barn manager, we have staff, we have a trainer, arena specialist, all the product manufacturers that are kind of specialized for horse products. And so maybe talk us through a successful project where you felt like it was a real collaborative environment and what made it so successful.
Sure, and you're right. It's a great observation. You do have a few more interests because it's a specialty sport. And there are different components to the sort of interest that people are bringing to you from that equestrian perspective, depending on what sort of area of interest they're coming from. The best sort of projects, I think, come when the ownership team and their sort of selected few trusted entourage is harmonious in how they like things. And typically when people do have, can you hear me okay? Should I be closer? When people do have, their trusted, closest allies in the sport, and many of the people that I think that we've worked with are very enthusiastic and big participants and in various sort of, venues. So they're in wintertime, they're in Wellington. That's a big part of what my practice has worked in. And, they're there and sharing, and of course they have their very close friends that are involved in, socially. And so what ends up happening is you kind of get brought into the inner circle. And that's when you really get to understand the various, the various specialties that each person has involved in this sport and with this client. So that's typically what I have found, that the personalities create an opportunity for uniqueness, and the uniqueness is the thing that inspires me. And it can come from many different corners of their interest. It could be they love traditional architecture. They're very into the history of their family involved in the sports and the multi-generational component to it. And so it's fascinating to me, how the facilities and the personalities involved behind are all kind of working together. And there is a harmony there.
So, Elaine, maybe you want to chime in on that, because from your perspective, we're working with the homeowners, you're representing the horses. And so I feel like a lot of times we might want to do something that, like have an aesthetic decision, and you're coming from the point of view of the horses who are also the clients, right? And so how do you navigate those kind of conversations with clients where maybe they want something that's aesthetically pleasing, you are advocating for the horse's welfare and safety, and the function of the barn?
I think that can be, it's an interesting question. I think when you get proposed something that can be contradictory, I think what you want to do is go back to the heart of why you're doing it. I mean, the reality is most people that want a horse facility, that want horses in their life, number one is the horses. When you can get to remind them that their horse is number one as far as why they want to have a barn, why they want to have an equestrian facility, it's not so tricky then to point out to them that they too would want safety and convenience for themselves, for the staff, for the horses, to be number one priority. And there's no reason that, as you can see with the place you've built, there's no reason it can't be safe and beautiful. But I think at the end of the day, when you come to a crossroad between aesthetics and safety, you've got to realize that horse is number one, and you've got to start with safety and then build around that. And I think also, when you have a happy staff and happy professionals that are thrilled to be there, your horses get taken care of better, your property gets taken care of better, and there's just a lot of things that can go into making everyone's life easier, with living accommodations and the cross ties and the arenas and the location of all the places and how the stalls work and where the tack room is. There's so many things you can do to make everyone's life easy, and when their life is easy and makes sense and successful, everyone seems to participate better. And that's a little bit what you're talking about with when you're putting a barn together, having your staff, your people you collaborate with, want to contribute their own specialties.
It's very true.
Did that answer your question fully enough?
Yash, do you want to speak to that as well?
Yeah, well, can everyone hear me? I'm positioned in a kind of a unique spot as a product manufacturer, right? Because our company, we manufacture all of the horse stalls, partitions, the doors, the windows, the flooring components, lighting, tack hardware. So we're sandwiched kind of in between a Wade and a Lane.
Sorry about that.
and maybe even a builder like a Joe or a Dean over there. But I think it's correct. I think you have to follow both form and function, right? For us, it's no different than when you're building a let's take an example of a high-end home, right? When you're building a private residence, let's say you're a builder or a manufacturer or an architect, you're going to interview every single person in that family, so you get to see a collective kind of philosophy for what that horse is going to feel like and function like, right? So similar for us as a product manufacturer, I think it's entirely important where you have to factor in the form, right? At the to start the project, here's a client who's bringing in a lot of financial resources and time and energy to invest in the product. But then, to Lane's point, it's ultimately about the horses, the safety, the comfort, the happiness, right? So I think what makes our job really unique is the fact that we get to work with the architect to really understand the function, the flow, the aesthetics, but then working with the trainers, the horse people who are actually on the ground and who are going to be dealing with these animals on a day in and day out basis is extremely important. So yeah, I think that's where the uniqueness comes in.
That's a lot of people to kind of manage, a lot of opinions and decision makers. And how are you making sure that everybody is aligned, the vision's aligned, and everybody's communicating? Anyone?
Well, I think first off, you start with dealing with people that you respect and enjoy being around. I mean, when you respect the other professionals for the incredible job that they're doing, you feel like you're more than capable of backing off and letting them do their part. You know, you believe in them and you hire them for a reason, the same reason that we get hired for a reason. I think the best thing you can do is choose an appropriate team that you truly respect and you truly believe that they have your best interest and your project's best interest and your horse's best interest, and then let them do their thing. And then that doesn't mean don't collaborate, but obviously let them do what they're great at. That's at least how I try to function with my vets or my farriers or my clients or, you know, the horse show managers, all the parts they're in charge of. I try to let them do their part. You know, I'm not a big fan of going to a doctor and then going, I don't like what he prescribed, now I'll go find someone that gives me what I want. I'm more of a fan of going to the person I believe in and then respecting and believing what they say.
Well, let's talk about choosing the team, since you brought that up. Lindsey, a lot of times you're one of the first ones. Don't roll your eyes at me, lady.
What? The first what?
You're often one of the first people on the project, you know, especially if you're going to sell something that needs to be renovated or a lot that needs to be developed. And, you know, your clients are often looking at you like, where do we start? What do we do? How do you advise them?
Yeah, I mean, we are really the first line of defense for the project, right? The client usually comes to us first with their design and their dream, essentially, right? And it's our job to make sure that the zoning is correct, that they can do what they want. Equestrian properties are so complex that it's really our job to make sure that Wade can do his job. And that's the first thing that, you know, I think that's our first responsibility.
It's true. That's a problem when it doesn't happen.
Yes, it's a big problem when it doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, I have a client that didn't happen for, and she spent 3 years getting nowhere and spending tons of money getting nowhere. So she's right that's an experienced talk.
Yeah, and just because it's there doesn't mean it's okay to be there, right? So, you know, don't shoot the messenger, but it's the truth. I mean, there's zoning, there's permitting, there's all sorts of things that go into these properties and these projects.
What's interesting is, you mean, the question was about communication, and actually, you as a trainer and a rider, you're kind of a translator for what the horses need for the rest of us, right? Because we're all speculating, right, and using historic precedents, but you actually are in tune with the horses. And
Try to be.
you're like the translator, which is a super important role.
Yeah, I mean, we try to be. I mean, I think, what's neat is when you deal with people that have dealt with horse people and have deal with horses and things like that, there is a mutual understanding. You know, you've built enough barns and designed enough barns to know what someone like either myself or my clients are really after. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens is, for myself, I'm not a good designer, but I still know what I want. So I think if I deal with someone that is a good designer, I can say what I think I want is this. And then when I hear the feedback from another professional, I go, yeah, actually, the portion of what I wanted is actually that, not this. And I think that's sometimes what I would rely on if I was asking a designer, or what my clients would rely on is, what do I really want out of what I think I want?
Mm-hmm.
What I love about what Lane is saying is, I don't think that there's really, at least at American Stalls, there's not really a hierarchy of who's opinion matters. I think it's really no different than any conversation is. There's going to be points where one party disagrees and one party agrees, and it's really just about having an organic conversation that then you then get to an end point where you all kind of compromise. And that compromise really is optimal for then that facility's longevity, the horse's happiness, the comfort, the safety. So I think, yeah, that was a great point, Lynn.
I got lucky.
Well, that's why it's valuable for your clients to have you, Lane, because you are the advocate for the horses, kind of the horse's point of view. And I think that can be really valuable. And also, you know the clients, you know their horses, you know what the horses need, you know what their future plans might be in terms of, are they going to get new horses, different kinds of, like we've talked a lot about how you work with the young horses and how young horses need different things on the property than the mature horses, and the obstacle courses that you build for them and working them through some of their fears and, as babies. And so do you want to talk at all about that?
Nope. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that when we spoke on the phone, all of us, we discussed that, every discipline and every homeowner, or we all might want something a little bit different. So I think having clear communication with your professionals, but also, having clear thoughts yourself as a horse owner or a horse trainer or whatever makes it where you can come to the appropriate answer. For myself, I think having many things on your property that you can use to benefit your riding or your training or your coaching is beneficial. So being able to discuss that with your team to say, look, what I'm really going to do is I primarily have dressage horses, or I primarily have jumping horses, or I believe in giving my horses turnouts, or I believe in having multiple arenas, because then I can have one for working on, giving a horse a lot of freedom. When you first start with young horse, a lot of times I think having them a little bit confined makes them feel safer. So if you have the means and you have the ability to design your own place, being able to have a variety of training areas that fit it within your safety parameters allow you to get a lot of things accomplished. But for example, in footing, for each profession, it's totally different. Good footing isn't just, I can't just say, I want good footing on my place. What is good footing? It's totally different for a reiner than it is for a jumper, than it is for dressage. Dressage and jumpers will be a little bit closer, but the footing that I want to go jump a Grand Prix on would break a reiner. It would break it in a day, potentially, not carrying around, but sliding on it. With the same token, the footing they slide on would break my horse. So I think it's important to have a clear vision of what you want, and then hire the correct people to advise you. Because a lot of times, especially these amateurs, they love their horses to death. They love them more than we love them sometimes, but they don't know. They walk on the beach and think, boy, this feels nice and squishy on my toes. We should get that. And that might be terrible for your horse. So I just think it's important to hire the people that are great at their job and take their advice in the areas that you need to.
Let's talk about assembling the team and the timeline of it, because I know sometimes people are confused about when to bring someone in, at what point in the project. I know personally speaking as a designer, people think, oh, we'll bring her in later when we're thinking about, countertops. But let's talk about the importance of assembling the team from the beginning. Yash, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. I think similar to Lindsey, I think a lot of times folks think that, okay, let's bring in the products. So for example, they'll think about doing the stalls or the doors or the flooring at the last point. But a lot of times, stabling equipment is the one niche where how you design your stall fronts, whether it's a hinged stall front or a sliding stall front. Like, let's say you're in Arroyo Del Mar, like where Sierra is, you have a 60 stall barn. A hinged European stall front design is not going to work, and that's something that having a product manufacturer in the front part of the conversations to talk with the architect, talk with the builder, especially if the builder and the architect do not have an equestrian background, is really invaluable, right? And there's a lot of product recommendations that we provide on a really fiduciary basis of this is the type of aisle flooring that's really going to make sense for your facility. But that aisle flooring, you don't really need to use that in your wash stall. You don't have to use this stall flooring for every single stall. So there's a lot of like nuances in design and selection of products that I think that with a product manufacturer, yes, it's easy for us to be brought in, once the permitting is done and once everything's ready to go, but you can save a lot of time, headache. I mean, talk about billables. If you brought in a product manufacturer on the front end, in my opinion.
And not only that, but each thing has a technical requirement. And to be able to plan for that from the very beginning helps with anticipated costs. People love to know what they're in store for financially. And those are the kinds of questions that can affect the bottom line. And so having that sort of relationship set in place is, I think, a critical one because part of project success is not just the aesthetics and, not how great it all of those things can certainly be added. But I think understanding what the investment's going to be is also equally important.
Can I actually do a follow-up to that, Wade?
Yeah.
Is the best projects that we work on are the ones that take a year, 2 years, or 3 years, where the architect, the builder, the product manufacturer, so it could be a stable manufacturer, it could be a footing provider, it could be a fencing solution provider, right? But assembling that whole team on the front end so that when the master planning is being done from the architect's end and you're working with the landscape architect, everything really progresses in harmony, in my opinion. So.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's and then the relationships that, when we're all listening to one another and the professional opinions, that's when I think you get this synergistic, equation of 1 + 1 = 3, right? Because there's.
You do math how I do math.
Well,
It's like horse math.
Yeah, for sure.
But I found that, learning from one another is what kind of inspires the best work. And when the owner is equally involved, then the uniqueness of their love for the sport becomes apparent. And those are the nice little details. But, I think the function, the longevity, how durable things are going to be, are, they're the most important. And I think all the other things that come after that are the dressing.
Mm-hmm.
So what about communication breakdowns? Where do they happen? How can we
Everywhere.
avoid
The
them?
beginning, the very beginning.
Well, Lindsay, maybe you want to start, where we can.
Well, I mean, I generally take Lane, right, the trainer, with me the first time we go to a property, and the trainer either says yes or no, but the trainer has a huge opinion and a huge say in the decision, right? But after that, we bring in Wade, we bring in Yash, we bring in you, Lindsay, to start making sure that all the things that we think we can want to do, are feasible.
Well, I think a lot of times if someone has a grand vision and they do want to share it with their trainer, right? That's one circumstance. That doesn't always happen, obviously. But when it does, I think said client will have talked to their trainer of many years typically about, wouldn't it be great if we did this? How would you feel about, if you're someone's trainer and they want to bring you along, they're asking for a big commitment out of you. They're asking you to uproot your business, and sometimes you don't get that choice. Sometimes that just happens because, places get sold from underneath you. That's happened to me before. I had 2 businesses. They were close to each other, thank goodness, and it wasn't that long, but the guy said, basically, it's for sale, but it won't sell because I've priced it at, $8 million over what I really want. So don't worry, you'll never have to leave. He was right. A year later, I was not there. So, but I think, so circumstances happen, but I think a lot of times the trainer will have talked with the client for a while. And, I think you get to hear what the client's real dream is. And I think sometimes it's our job to help articulate, and that's our job in a lot of things. It's our job to articulate that about, I'm going to ask them, what is your goal? You think you want this, but what goal do you have for your daughter or yourself or your son or yourself, And then it's up to us to, like you talked about translating earlier, it's up to us to translate, well, if you really want this, it's actually going to take that. And then they know from our, expertise in our profession that, okay, I can trust them in this area. They're going to know how big of a place or how many stalls or what type of footing or how big of arenas or, things along those lines. And then we rely on the experts to put that dream into motion. I think what would happen a lot of times is the client would start building their ideas around the trainer, and then we'd hand it over. And then midway through putting it together, they say, do we like this layout? I don't know that we have so much to do with any of the building process other than, keeping the fire alive for the dream and, helping people make a rational decision. Not just, I would love it if Fluffy was way out back. You might. But we have to go get him, and if he's, gets hurt, So just sometimes, you got to bring a sense of, you got to keep the love and excitement alive. They want them to have the place they want, but the reality of, I know, but myself and yourself. Remember how you didn't want to walk all the way to the cross size that was 50 feet that way? You definitely don't want to walk all the way back there, And then they go, oh yeah, you're right. So I think that's part of what we sometimes bring to the table.
Wade, where do you see communication breakdowns happen?
So I think if there are different anticipated visions for the project and some of the critical team members are not on the same page, I think that can create an adversarial, component to a team makeup. I think the best sort of team members are the ones or in the ownership, kind of set the pace. And if they're not on the same page, that's where I found the most sort of like, friction in communication. It's always best when the owners are on the same page and have the same goals.
It's extra fun when, like, the wife is the rider and the husband wants nothing to do with the horses, and he's like, that's going to cost how much?
Yeah.
Why do we need that?
The most successful sort of makeup from ownership that I found is when both are riders, and they both have, they can communicate and understand where their frustrations come from. Then I think the other problems that I found in makeup is, if the property came from one of the owners, then there is this long sort of relationship with the property, and one may be able to sort of see it from a much more sort of functional standpoint, and the other is looking at it from a much more romantic standpoint, and that can also sometimes like wait, you're going to change that? I don't want that changed. Or in one case, I had a client come to us, and the wife said, you're not allowed to proceed with anything on the property because it needs to come from a total vision standpoint and not from piecemeal, fixes. And you have to have a master plan so that we have a linear path forward and you can implement it in stages. So that's been another sort of problem that I've come up against is, one member is wanting a clear vision and a structured, sort of path forward. And the other is like, oh, we need this, let's just build that. And it doesn't come from a standpoint of a harmonious vision. So, but those are I mean, I've had a couple of experiences like that, but I have to say, for the most part, I think it's amazing to me how many people are on the same page in the equestrian world and in their sort of experiences and vision. It could be the thing that kind of connected them in the beginning. A familiarity from horse shows or other endeavors that they're involved in from the sport. And so they've had, time together to, sort of say, what we really need and build a vision based on that. So it's unique in that I've had very few bad experiences and mostly really good experiences.
Yash, would you like to talk about communication?
Yeah, sure. I'm not going to belabor a lot of the points that have been made because they're pretty consistent in my experience. I think I'd want to double click on Wade's share, though, I think for the most part, communication is really good on most projects. There's pretty much a lot of alignment from the ownership side and from the trainers and the riders and all the other stakeholders, like let's call it in ownership. I actually think that the most breakdown in communication for us as manufacturers happens with the external folks. So the builder, the architect, the landscape architect. There's going to be so many competing rivaling egos almost involved that mistake was actually on the product manufacturer, or that mistake was actually on the GC. So we see that there's a misalignment and a lack of understanding that, guys, we're on the same team, and we are looking to deliver really one thing, which is the client's happiness and satisfaction, and that is synonymous with the horses have to be happy and safe. That's it, right? Everything else is second. So I think that communication happens when the client does not sometimes set the standard and the expectation with, it's not subcontractors, but their assembled team that, guys, cut it out. We're all on the same team. And in our experience, again, it's kind of similar to Wade's experience. It's very minimal. I've had maybe 3 or 4. I've seen if we do 300 to 500 projects per year, I see that happen 3 to 5 times per year, where there's a big breakdown in communication like that. But it usually, in my experience, happens externally instead of internally in the ownership group.
Someone else on the team saying that
It's a competing ego.
It's never us.
interest.
It's always them.
It's yeah.
it's not the
what I
architect or the
heard.
trainer. No.
It's not you, it's me.
No.
Yeah.
Lindsey, I'm curious to know what kind of trends are you seeing in properties right now that people are looking for?
So I feel like the luxury client is looking for cohesion and functionality, right? If they're going to live on the property, they want their main residence to be luxurious and high end, but they also want it to fit with the equestrian facilities. I would say a lot of the equestrian buyers or equestrian clients, they want the clubhouse overlooking, the ring with the premier footing and the automatic waterers. They want turnouts. To Lane's point earlier, they want trail access, right? So they can mix it up a little bit, change it out for the horses and even the humans, right? We all need a break from the arena. I think most importantly, it's location, right? The location determines their lifestyle. So here in San Diego, they want to be in Rancho, they want to be in Encinitas, and they want to be in Del Mar, right? If you go outside of that, it changes the lifestyle, and lifestyle is everything. So,
Not as many properties available in those areas.
well, there's plenty outside,
Yes, I know.
but they're out in the sticks, and
Yeah,
the clients don't want to go there.
That's no problem.
Right. So,
There's some beautiful places. Like I know Bonsel's got some beautiful places. Fallbrook's got some beautiful places, but it can be a nightmare. I mean, not always, but
Right.
you need to be at the one that you're allowed to do what you want.
correct.
Or have it be exactly what you want when you buy it. But a lot of times people want to change this and change that, whether it be discipline or the fact they just have their own vision. So
Right.
there's other great places, but it needs to be a place that likes the horse community, not doesn't like it.
Correct. That is another key point.
So, Wade, I have a question for you. One of the reasons I wanted to assemble this group was so that I would have people that really know what they're doing on a project. And
And then I was an addition.
What's that?
And I was some random addition.
No,
Me too, Lane. It's okay.
no, I just mean like the Luxury Equestrian Network in general. But I talked to a builder recently who said, well, why do you look for builders that specialize in equestrian work? I mean, any good builder can build anything if they have good plans. And I said, well, I do believe that's true, but also there's a lot of unique challenges that go into an equestrian facility, and I think that it is important, especially for the clients, to understand that we know what we're doing, that we can handle these kind of challenges, because there are a lot of unique challenges. Do you want to talk about some of those? The types of challenges that you've found on an equestrian property that's maybe different than a residential.
So what I've realized is that a lot of times, when I get involved in a project, it's because things haven't worked out in their either, existing facilities. And when you get to tour them, they can point the stuff out, right? They can walk around and saying, the horses chew on all the wood. We can't have, just raw wood sitting there. And in where I'm from in Wisconsin, right, we also have weather, right? So you have the seasonal issues where water freezes and, it's cold in the barns, or, whatever the issues are, icing, weather, snow, et cetera. And people get frustrated with that, which is why they're saying, we need to change. We're gonna hire somebody and move a project along. So when I hear things like that, what's missing is that you don't have the experiences of seeing how things fail. Seeing how things fail sometimes is a really great ingredient on how to come up with creative solutions to the frustration that somebody feels when things aren't working properly. And so for me, I think, being involved in the discussion earlier in my career, has exposed me to failures and things that aren't necessarily working. And that's a pretty important ingredient, I think, into being able to bring your experience to the table and be familiar with how things break down.
Yash, I'm sure that you see a lot of failures that you come to fix, right?
Jeez.
Stalls that are chewed up and...
Yeah, we do. I think, it's working with a builder or an architect that doesn't have the equestrian experience. There's just a lot of components. And let's even take aside the stalls or the doors. Sometimes they'll create the aisle to be tiny. So how do you have a rider or somebody who's assisting the horse? How do you then have the horse or multiple horses? And then how do you have a hinged door open, right? Something as simple as that. Or let's take all that aside. How do you even put a tractor or some sort of machinery through the aisle to accommodate like more seamless cleaning, right? And we see the same thing with ceiling pitches or heights of doorways and stuff. So even without even getting to the actual stalls and doors and windows and flooring, there's just so many ways where I think having a little bit of an experienced team, and if that doesn't mean you need a builder or an architect that's seasoned in equestrian properties, although that helps, but you can bring in other kind of experts who help just look at a set of plans and just serve as part of your team to kind of consult the entire process. I can do a whole other 30-minute podcast style thing on just the actual components, but I'll stop there.
Wade, how do you prepare clients when they're getting ready to get into a big project? How do you mentally, emotionally prepare them?
You know what? I think I think that would probably be a challenge to somebody who's new to the sport. But a lot of times what I've experienced is that people have grown up in this sport and their parents are involved or grandparents even. And, they've had a lot of experience in seeing their friends build a new facility, or if they're in an environment where they're, active in the sport itself, right, in the competition, then, they've been kind of hanging in a group of people that are all in that sort of same theater. And they've picked up things along the way. So they come pretty well prepared. Like they'll say, I had one client who came to me and said, I don't want any rafters or anything exposed. I don't want to see any trusses. I don't want to see anything because the birds go in there and they make a mess of everything, and I just don't want to deal with it. So, we're going to have clean ceilings everywhere, right? And to an architect, that's devastating because we love all that exposed structure and stuff. But you realize that the functionality of this space takes precedent over the romance, and that you have to be willing to find creative solutions to get both. And I think having the right siting of the facilities on the property is probably one of the most important components to a design. Prevailing winds and, where do you put the muck and, all the other stuff that's, part of a functioning, equestrian facility is one of those things that you have to sort of weave in that functionality first, and then find creative solutions to the aesthetic direction that you'd like to have. So I think that's, and I think, when you're considering any building endeavor, it's really important to sort of have the team assembled, because from the contracting side, from the other components that you're weaving into this vision, and who is going to be active in creating this vision, that to me is one of those really important ingredients, is to say, I can design anything for you, but we need to have the team assembled. We need the contractor. We need the footing specialist. We need, the manufacturer's components that are going to be involved in this. You need the interior designer, because we're going to be dealing with the aesthetic components as well as the function, right? It's lighting and, cleanliness and an aesthetic, and how it's woven into the vision of either an entire estate, or at least this component, which may be multiple buildings. There's stables, there's stalls, there's, storage, there's feed, there are maintenance, needs and, places for maintenance equipment. All of those things are important. And you may end up having even dormitories for grooms and for trainers and for other people that are involved in this process, especially when you're very aggressive in the competition, right? So it's important to set those expectations and the players needed from the very beginning.
Well, unless you guys have anything to add, I'd love to open it up to a Q&A. Do you guys have it?
Can I say
Yeah, of
one
course.
We've been all talking about all the things you have to look for and all the details, right? But for me, like personally, what makes each project so special is the people of the project, right? It's working with an amazing architect. It's working with an amazing builder. It's working with other component manufacturers. It's working with the realtor who might have sourced the project for us. It's working with the trainers, the farriers, all the different stakeholders. Like that's what all of that synergy, let's call it for lack of a better term, and that involvement, like that's what makes this project special, because you have different energies all of a sudden, and that's reflected in the end result, right? So I'm grateful for this group and this discussion, because it's really the people that make that project special, and the horses.
Well said. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
So, thank you guys. Love hearing the collaboration and just different perspectives. I think my biggest question is more so like hoping for some advice. We have a lot of clients who are either selling vacant land or buying vacant land because they have a dream to have home, equestrian property, whether it's for boarders or for private facility. As you know, California is extremely restricted. Developing here is really, really cool. And so working with you guys, I feel like is the fun part. That's when all the excitement happens. when they get to make all these great decisions and their vision gets to come to life, and they get to see the plans and pick out the materials and have this amazing team. I guess for that part between when they purchase and when they get to work with you guys, that to me is the hardest part. When they're trying to navigate permitting, getting typographic reports, understanding utility connections, if there's not water, getting a well, that part to me, it's ugly, it's expensive, it's hard, they've got to have grit. They need good contacts in civil. What's your recommendation for like helping keep them encouraged and moving through that process when it is so grueling and hard to even get to that point where, is it buildable? Is it achievable? Is their permit going to get approved? How many times are they going to have to hear back from the city, to adjust the plans to make it so that it's approved? Oh wait, there's a wildlife, protected bird on the property. Now all of a sudden the location has to be moved. So I guess for that part of it, could you guys share a little bit of your insight into how to keep the energy, the momentum, navigating that process healthy and alive?
Great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big question all the way for everybody, really. You guys start.
It starts with really thorough due diligence. I mean, when somebody's contemplating purchasing a property, right? It's, where do we start with the due diligence, understand, what's compatible programmatically, with the property, with the village or town or wherever it's located, and what's the process of getting approvals, and that's all part of due diligence. It's about, having a survey that's current. It's about, understanding what the zoning, sort of limits are, what is in the area that is compatible, that we know has been approved with some precedent. So due diligence is obviously probably one of the most important components, and a lot of times it's a contingency item, I think, isn't it, on a real estate deal?
To some extent, right? There's only so much contingency we can put in.
Well, and land is hard because people like getting lenders for land here is so much more difficult and more expensive than just a single family home. So a lot of times it's people who like the look of the land. Maybe there's an equestrian property next door, but it's oftentimes a cash purchase because they're, it's just going to be cheaper than getting a loan. So the due diligence process, from my experience, is not as extensive as what that civil process is. So sometimes they buy the land before they even realize what's feasible.
That's sort of that's the root of lawsuits. I hate to say it, but due diligence is we get involved in projects, before clients even, purchase property, to do due diligence. What's compatible here? How much square footage can we have? What is the limit of how many horses you can keep in one facility? Do you have the ability to sprinkler these barns and these outbuildings, and where's the water coming from, et cetera? Those are all really, really important, questions to answer. Or like you said, endangered species, right? Because it does affect whether or not, some group is going to come out and, oppose you in your first, design review with your municipality. It is essential. I think it's an essential component to it. And it is the dream of people who are like, I found this great property. It's got this amazing view. I can picture all these things, and they have their hopes and dreams set up for it. And then you come back and you say, hey, I'm sorry. It's, a prohibited use or something like that. But if you don't let your enthusiasm take advantage of you, and you do hire people that are familiar with the local codes and zoning and things like that, at least you can start to check off some of the possible hurdles that you need to overcome. And if there's a solution to those hurdles, which typically there is, but there, you cannot sort of emphasize how important that component is.
Better to find out on the front end that a property's not going to work
Yeah.
Yeah.
than buy it and then find out.
I think one of the things you had mentioned though was keeping the enthusiasm alive, and I think like the way I can relate to that would be with horse purchasing. You have this vision, or they have a vision that they explain to you, and I think one of the key ingredients to that is to buy into their vision as long as it's appropriate, share in their vision, but then also throughout the whole process, what I do is I let my people know, look, this seems great. Here we have to do more investigating, but it's not the only horse. You want these 4 things, 10 things, it doesn't matter the number of things. We will absolutely find you those 4, 8, 10 things, but it might not be this horse, it might not be this property. I think you need to let them know that you see their vision, you see their wants, you see their needs, right? They have both wants and needs. That you understand them, and I think when they feel understood, and that you can convey back to them that you understand them, you can let them know that yeah, we're both after the same thing. This might not be it, but boy, do we hope it is. I understand like from a sales perspective and from a purchasing perspective, you don't want it to be negative. Like I don't want to be negative. I don't want to say, look, just want to let you know your horse might not pass the vet check. We want to buy it. It's a very similar thing, really. On the same token, I think when they know that you really do know what they want and you're bound and determined to find it for them, they're going to be at peace waiting for the next one. You have to let them know that this might not work, but we hope it does. And if it doesn't, we have another solution. That's at least how I think I would go about answering the question you asked.
Lane, I think you nailed it. I think so much of it is just reaffirming the vision and just setting the expectation and just consistently kind of revisiting. I think it's brilliant. And I think, Jesse, to your point, like you talked about land, but like let's say there's an existing property with an existing barn and they're like, what do I do with this? Like this barn is in amazing shape or it's in terrible shape and there's pipe corral everywhere, right? It's our job as a company to really help maintain the enthusiasm, but set the realistic expectations and provide the fiduciary style of kind of recommendations and assessment, right? So, yeah.
Anyone else? No other questions? We have this amazing team here, great minds.
We answered
You
all
have
their
no
questions, but they don't want to
left?
talk to us.
Any other
What?
favorite horse story?
My favorite horse story? Me or everyone? Okay.
Horse.
So there are families that I've worked for that had a really special horse that, won a bunch of Grand Prix and, and then, time goes on and, they have to retire the horse, right? So I think one of my favorite stories is that, there was this special effort made for the retired horses, on where they, were going to have their pasture and where they were going to have, their environment and typically, they would, memorialize, all of the achievements that this horse had made, not only in their lives, right, to the different generations and the people in their family, but also to the barn itself, right? So, these, finding a place for the plaques and for the, for the awards and, dressing it up and finding that is really cool. You know what I mean? Like this animal has made a huge impression on this family, and I love that. To me that it's to me a great house is when it's filled with memories and pictures and it's been there for generations and it's been the backdrop to the kids growing up and to family occasions and special celebrations and traditions. And I love that when that filters into the stables and into the arenas and things like that, where those memories are just as important. And so when the barn, can become a scrapbook of great achievements, I think that's probably my favorite horse story. You,
I've done the same thing with, I don't know if you've seen pictures of my office, but when my horse passed away, the horse I had for 20 years, I had all this tack.
yeah.
And it just didn't feel right to leave it all in the garage. And some of it was just getting moldy, and I brought it all into the house, and I just wanted pieces of her around me. And I think we were on a Zoom call recently, and someone made a comment about the saddle on my chair, and that was my hunt saddle. And when she passed, it didn't fit my new horse, and I just want those things close to me. It makes me feel like she's still here.
They're heirlooms.
Yeah.
They're no different than anything else, you know? I mean, it's amazing how they become members of the family.
It's a beautiful way to remember her too.
Even just hanging a halter in your house.
I love your
like with
office.
their nameplate. It's,
That's why I love tack rooms. You know, tack rooms are so
a lot of history.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I looked at all this tack, and it was like from when we played polo, from when we fox hunted, the trail riding, all these different things that we did throughout her life.
Yeah.
And how it changed, each season of her life. I'd retire her from polo, and then we were just fox hunting, and then we were just trail riding at the end. And so it's the history in that tack.
It's a very romantic sort of component to it, but to me, those are the things that make that substance collected life, with the, adventures. And, if your horse has been part of your adventures, those become part of the background, is the history.
And if you're a horse person, yeah, they are your adventures. I mean, they become a part of your soul.
Yeah.
When I post pictures of my spaces where I've done that with my tack, that's when I get the most comments from random people, just like, my heart horse just passed away, and I was trying to figure out what to do with this tack. And people from all over the world are just sharing their stories with me about horses that they've loved and lost, and opening up to me. It's amazing.
Yeah. And sometimes those retired horses will be a part of the background for many, many years. It's not like they're useful and then done, right? I mean, there's a component of love and emotion there's this connectedness between the animal and the owner, and it's really beautiful to sort of be a part of that.
Lane, I'm sure you don't have any horse stories.
I mean, to be fair, I was thinking, I thought, man, we don't have enough time. I think just to kind of make it a little bit about design, if anybody wants to ask me later, you can ask me. I've got 1,000 stories. But I'd say picture walls. I think picture walls, as far as design go, picture walls are my favorite. Because for someone like myself, I've been on hundreds and hundreds of horses, and people say, who's your favorite? Well, I can't say I have a favorite. I can say I have favorites. I can say I have a favorite at the moment. But when you're a trainer and you're a competitor, you develop a little bit of a different relationship with them. They're your pet some, but they're more your partner. And when you've gone to jump for whatever division you ride or compete at, when you've gone to the highest level, your highest level or their highest level, either way, I mean, some of my biggest memories were with horses that gave me their best, and their best was average. Some of my favorite horses have been horses that jumped a meter 20 or meter 30, but they only had meter 10 jump, and everything else was heart. I've ridden some horses, I've won some Grand Prix on horses that were pukes, that really didn't want to do the job, and they were talented, but they hated it. I try not to get those. That's been my job sometimes, is to have horses perform at a level for clients to try to make them do it, but they hate it, and I don't blame them. But the ones that love it, the ones that give you their heart and their soul and give you their everything, either if you've reached your pinnacle with them, or they've reached their pinnacle with you, I think that makes a special horse. And if ever I have those, I try to have a picture. I've got hundreds of horse pictures hanging up in my house. I've got my pictures of my horses and my kids. The rest I don't really care about. It's true. I really don't. Where do you sleep? I don't know. Somewhere up there. But for me, so we talked about the memories, and you brought up tack as memories, or photos as memories, or an old barn as memories, or a retired horse. What it really boils down to is what elicits feelings or memories of the feeling, because that's what we have at the end of the day, So, yeah.
Lindsey, I have a question for you. when did this trend start where these barns are sort of dependent on homes? We were a few weeks ago with Joe on Rancho Santa Fe looking at a new barn they're doing. It has an outdoor kitchen, it has outdoor patios, it has a living room, it has an indoor kitchen, it has stalls. I mean, it's amazing. And are you seeing this trend as well?
I think it's been going on for a while. I mean, like barn dominiums, people want to live right above their horses. I think that it's growing, and I mean, I personally don't want to leave the barn. So if I lived there, or if I had a kitchen there, I'd probably never leave. But
We don't
yeah,
leave much. We don't leave much.
right. But I do have to go home to eat.
Yeah. No, but we
Yeah,
don't
the
leave much. So
kitchen.
you're right. It's like the more.
Oh, you don't need much.
No, we don't leave much. So the
Oh.
reality of the more things you have, I think people are realizing that they spend so much time.
Yeah,
I mean, horse people are nuts.
I know. We don't want to leave. Like horse
I mean,
time.
We are. We're a
It's
little
like,
bit
I'm
nuts.
just
If you're
going to
not
run to
nuts,
the
you're not
barn
really a
and
horse person. Like,
throw a
it's just-
blanket on. I'll be right back, 6 hours later. Yeah.
Barns are great spaces too. They're big, they're voluminous, they're made of, raw, authentic materials most of the time, historic ones in particular. People make entertainment spaces out of them. I mean, we've all opened magazines and seen, this long aisle table down the middle of a stable that is, completely buffed out for a holiday, right? Because they're having a huge group for, dinner, and there's no place in the house big enough. So they take it out to the barn, and it's amazing, because you can do anything.
Dean is smiling over there because we're finishing up a party barn that looks like a horse barn right now together. Two stalls, yeah, exactly. But I think what it is like, we talk a lot about it internally in our team, is like in a day and age of there's just so much stress these days, right? Your work stress follows you into home, and then vice versa, and there's all the digital phones and everything. People want to be disconnected. And where can you be disconnected? It's the barn, right? And I think
Speak for yourself.
but I think it's that trend of wanting to feel more or not disconnected, but wanting to feel more connected to the right things, right? And I think that's one thing. And then I think another thing which we're seeing is there's two other trends that we're seeing as like a manufacturer is the top facilities, like on the commercial side. So we just did the Kentucky Horse Park. You see WEC in Ocala, Florida. You're seeing these large facilities starting to really upgrade the amenities, right? It's really looking the part. Folks who own horses and are competing at the highest level, they're used to a certain standard in different parts of their life, right? So why is that standard not being met in the barn? Why are we okay with not so great safety or not so great comfort? So I think you're seeing some of that also be a part of it.
Well, I think that's it, you guys. Thank you so much. Wade is going to be signing his book, so please make sure you stop by his table over there. And thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you guys for being on the panel,
Thank you.
especially on your birthday. Lindsay has to go. She has a dinner now.
Can we say?
No,
Yes.
no. Let's eat.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
You guys are too sweet.
Happy birthday, dear Lindsay. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Probably beat red too. It's okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.